Hash, the hitchhiker, whose address doesn't exist. He gave me an address before getting in. After he got out, the address vanished from the map. I drive a long stretch of mountain highway once or twice a month for work, a 2-hour route between job sites with almost nothing in between. No towns, spotty signal, the kind of road you learn to keep a full tank of gas for out of habit, rather than necessity. I don't normally pick up hitchhikers. I want that on record, because what happened isn't a story about carelessness. It's a story about one specific night where the usual rule I keep didn't feel like it applied. He was standing at a pull-off about 40 minutes into the drive, alone. No car visible nearby, no obvious reason to be there. I slowed without fully deciding to, and he asked politely for a ride up toward the turn for County Road 9. An address he gave with the specific, over-precise detail. Over-precise detail of a lot number. A road name I didn't recognize, despite driving this route for years. A landmark I'd never noticed. I let him in. And he was quiet, unremarkable, thanked me twice in the first 5 minutes, and then said, "Very little else." I didn't think much of any of it until roughly 15 minutes later, glancing at my phone mounted on the dash for navigation, when I noticed the road he'd named simply wasn't on the map. Not unlisted, not unnamed. The map showed a stretch of undeveloped forest exactly where he described a lot number and a house. I didn't say anything. I told myself GPS coverage out here is unreliable, that plenty of older or private roads don't show up on consumer map apps, and kept driving. He asked me to pull over at a bend in the road that, as far as I could see, had nothing at it. No driveway, no mailbox, no visible structure through the trees. He thanked me a third time, got out, and started walking directly into the tree line, rather than along any path I could identify. And I sat there a moment before pulling away, telling myself it wasn't my business how a stranger chose to walk. I checked the map again once I had signal back, mostly out of leftover unease. The address was still missing. Not just absent from search results, but the entire area showing as an unbroken stretch of forest. No roads, no parcels, nothing. I didn't think about it seriously again until 8 months later, when I bought a piece of land. I want to be clear that the timeline here isn't something I constructed after the fact to make a better story. My wife and I had been looking for property for over a year before that ride even happened, in a completely different part of the state as far as either of us knew, working with a realtor who kept sending us listings that didn't fit until seemingly out of nowhere. A small parcel came up along that same mountain highway. Not through any search we'd initiated, but flagged to us by the realtor as a new listing that matched our criteria unusually well. We toured it. We loved it. We didn't connect it at the time to anything from that drive 8 months earlier. It's a long highway, and I hadn't thought about the hitchhiker in months. It was only after we closed, and I was driving the route again, this time to our own land, that I recognized the bend in the road. It was the exact spot he'd gotten out. I sat in the car a long time that day before walking the property. No, I told myself, the way you do, that mountain roads have a limited number of memorable bends, that I was pattern matching two unrelated things because the setting overlapped. I want to have believed that. I mostly did for a while. What made it harder to believe was the survey, our parcel's official lot number, assigned by the county, generated through an entirely bureaucratic process that had nothing to do with us, was close enough to the number he'd given me that night. Where I'd jotted down the details from that strange ride as an aside months earlier, half joking, in a message I'd forgotten I'd sent. County Road 9, Bartar. Only hostes gypsy. The lot number matched exactly. I hadn't told the realtor that story before she found the listing. I checked. There was no way she could have known to steer us toward the specific parcel based on anything I'd said. We built, eventually, a small house on that land. Nothing extravagant, the kind of place you retire into slowly over a few years of weekend work. I think about the ride less than I probably should most months until something reminds me. Usually some small detail about the property that lines up a little too neatly with what a stranger described to me before either of us knew this house would ever exist. The detail that unsettled me the most 2 years after we moved in, going through old paperwork. From the land purchase, when I found the original county records for the parcel, the ones showing its history before any development, back way, and it was still classified as unincorporated forest. Exactly the way my phone had shown it that night. 8 months before we bought it. The records office had a scanned copy of the original 1962 survey plat for the area, filed decades before either of us were born, showing the boundary lines for what would eventually become our lot. In the margin, in a surveyor's handwriting, I have no way of verifying beyond what the county clerk assured me was authentic and undisturbed. Someone had written a note beside the boundary marker closest to that bend in the road. It said simply, "Access road to be completed when needed." I asked the clerk what that phrase typically meant on old plats like this. She said it was unusual phrasing. Usually surveyors just marked roads as planned or unplanned, not conditional on some undefined future need. She didn't have a better explanation and didn't seem particularly interested in one. Then, I don't know who the man on the mountain road was, or how he knew about a house that, at the time, existed only as an unassigned parcel of undeveloped forest with a note in a 60-year-old survey suggesting someone decades ago had already anticipated. Ted, it would eventually be needed. I stopped trying to build a theory that accounts for all of it cleanly. What I do know is that we live here now, my wife and I, in a house built on land a stranger described to me as his home. 8 months before it became mine. Describing, as far as I can tell, an address that existed at the time he said it. Possibility waiting patiently in an old surveyor's margin note for someone to eventually need it. I've never seen him again. I check the tree line some evenings at that same bend, longer than I probably should, telling myself I'm just enjoying the view. I haven't decided yet whether I'm hoping to see him standing there again, or hoping I never do.